Hi, my name is Evelyn Go, and I'm the Shedden Professor of Strategic Policy Studies at the Australian National University. I'm here to tell you a bit about the new working paper, which I have done for the RSIS working paper series. The paper is entitled The Asia-Pacific's Age of Uncertainty. In the paper, I argue that our region is living through what I call an age of uncertainty. This uncertainty arises from three very important trends. First of all, great power competition is obviously increasing in our region, and we seem to be living through what international relations scholars call a power transition, where we expect to see that China as a rising power may indeed overtake, possibly with conflict, the United States as the great power leader of the region. Clearly, we're living in a period where China has risen. At the same time, we're becoming increasingly uncertain about the US commitment and role in the region. At the same time, we're also seeing other regional powers with quite different political systems on the rise. So that's the first trend. The second trend is that we're seeing unprecedented globalized interdependence reshaping our region. This, of course, means that interdependence is creating for our region great degrees of connectivity as well as vulnerability at the same time. We saw this, we are seeing this most clearly today with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic in the region. The third trend that we're simultaneously having to deal with is what is called by some the fourth industrial revolution. The technological advancements that happen rapidly and unpredictably that could revolutionize everything from the way we lead our everyday lives to our defense system, to the way our economies run, to the way our social organizations run. So with these three rapid and seemingly quite chaotic shifts, the interconnections between economics on the one hand and security on the other hand have also become more complex and more urgent and significant. So in this paper, what I do is first, I look in a little bit more detail at the changes on the great power competition front, and then the changes on the globalization and economic interdependence front. And then at the end of the paper, I look at three ways in which the economic security nexus impact on the Asia Pacific. Just to give you a quick overview, on the great power competition theme, I argue in the paper that what we're seeing in the Asia Pacific is that we're moving from a pre-existing regional order that was a really unusual one. If I use an analogy, an architectural analogy, it's as though previously, after the Cold War, the Asia Pacific was like a building, a really unusual one that stood only on one pillar. Okay, so you have this house and then one pillar underneath it. And we're moving from that to the kind of building that we see more often in the tropics, which is a building that stands on many different stilts and has foundations made of different sized legs. So we're moving from a single US-dependent pillared system into a multi-pillared system in the Asia Pacific. I use this phrase a lot in the paper. I talk about how in this age of uncertainty, we're transitioning into a system that is marked by more actors, more factors, and more vectors. In other words, we're moving to a much more plural system. On the theme of globalization and economic interdependence, in the paper, I look in more depth at what are some of the shifts that we're seeing in terms of the global economy. I argue in the paper that in the Asia Pacific particularly, we're living through a time when we're coming to, the fruition of a shift of the global economic center of gravity from the West back to the East, right? Partly because of the rise of China, but partly also because of the rise of other regional economies and the rise of the regional middle classes, which have consuming power. This means essentially that the strength of economic variables is acute in the Asia Pacific. Where does this leave us, right, when we combine the great power competition and the globalization and the shift of economic power? In the third part of the paper, then, I look at 3 areas in which the economic and security nexus become really problematic for the Asia Pacific. First, I look at how the foundations of hegemony, in other words, the foundations of any great power trying to lead in the region and in the world, are economic, right? And how this poses a problem both for the United States and for China. Secondly, I look at China's growing connectivity power in its enormous initiatives, infrastructure building, connectivity standards building across large parts of Greater Asia, and how that is changing the nature of how power is exercised by great powers. And finally, in that section, I look at what others have called the discontents of globalization. How at the economic security nexus, one of the most challenging problems for governments of our time is that globalization is creating a lot of left behind people. And how that sense of being left behind and alienated by globalization creates social, political, economic, deep-seated problems that have to be addressed as economic reforms are carried out in countries in the region. So I'm sure that Asia-Pacific security and economy are going to be debated for a long time to come. And I think the surface of that debate will continue to focus for quite a long time on questions like, whether we are in a new Cold War between the US and China, or whether and how should we contain or stand up to China. But I hope what I do in this paper is to highlight that there are much bigger and deeper changes going on in the international system, and how some of these big and deep trends really surface in the Asia Pacific beyond just the US-China relationship problem. And I hope that, the paper conveys my conviction that today a much wider range of actors and states than before can exercise real agency, right, in making choices that can shape our region in the years and decades to come. I hope that the big picture survey that I provide in this paper helps to convey a wider sense of possibilities to our present and future strategic leaders. So I hope you enjoy reading the paper. Thank you very much.